Well, today is definitely going to be a fun foodie adventure. We are going to learn how to make the most delicious homemade bread ever. Does that sound good? Yes. All right. But not only the bread, we're going to make some sausage cheese pizza rolls and some cinnamon raisin bread. I'm going to show you how to make 5 loaves of bread in less than 2 hours. Because I know we're all short on time, right? So to get started, you have the recipe in front of you. It's either in the cookbook or in your handouts. And we're going to make the 5-loaf recipe. So to get started, the first thing it calls for is 6 cups of warm water. So I'm going to take my top off and I'm going to get the water warming up and then we're going to pour that in. Okay, so I've got the water and you really want about 105 degrees. And I know most of you are thinking, well, how will I know if it's 105? It's just really warm but not hot, okay, and not cool. If you're brand new at making bread, a good investment would be to get a thermometer and just check your water so then you kind of get an idea. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. So I've got my 6 cups of water, and I've already measured out my ingredients. I've got my olive oil and my honey. One trick to making bread is have your ingredients measured out before you start. I don't know how many times I've made bread, and then we go to eat it, and it's like, oh no, what did I miss? And now I'm going to go ahead and add the 4 eggs. And are you looking at the recipe and just following along as we go? And what's my next ingredient?
4 tablespoons of yeast.
Okay, so I've already got my yeast measured out. And then I'm going to add some dough enhancer, and I'll explain these ingredients when we get to a part where I can stop and explain them to you. But right now I just want to get our bread cooking. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add the flour. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put 10 cups of flour in there. So the flour I just milled, and in just a little bit I'm going to show you about milling that. And I don't want to tap it down into the cup. I just want to scrape it off, because tapping it down you're going to end up having too much flour in your bread, which is going to make a very dry bread. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on, and I'm just going to mix it slightly so I have like a cake batter. So I've got it mixed up just the way I want it. It's like a cake batter, and now I'm going to let this sponge for 10 to 15 minutes. And once you get really good at making bread, you can actually skip this step, but when you're brand new, go ahead and do it so you can see how the yeast is going to react and how it's going to actually double this in size, and it's going to help our bread develop the gluten. But if you're in a hurry, you can skip it, and because our yeast is so good, it's such a professional grade, it will still do well. Okay? So while this is sponging, and we're going to see it when it's done, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the ingredients that we use today. So let me start with the yeast. The yeast is a professional brand. And you know, for years we've been buying yeast in the store in the packets and in those jars, and we've been spending a fortune. So this vacuum packed container, which is SAF, is pronounced safe or SAF. Different people pronounce it different ways. There's different brands, but this is one of the better brands. It's professional quality, and it's very forgiving if your temperature of the water is off a little bit. So that's what I like, and it will work really well. Okay, another ingredient that we used today was dough enhancer. The dough enhancer actually creates a very favorable environment for the yeast to grow. It's going to help the yeast rise. It's going to help your bread rise higher. It's also going to make a softer and fluffier bread. So we only use a little bit though. Now this is an optional ingredient. You do not have to have this to make bread. It just helps the bread to rise higher, and it will make it so the yeast will work better, and it actually will extend the life of your bread. So in other words, I could leave it sitting out on the counter for a couple more days and it will stay fresh because of the ingredients that are in it. And if you do have dough enhancer, and typically you're going to find this from most of your internet sites, internet bread selling sites, you can also use it like in your pancakes, your waffles, your muffins, anything else you're using the flour for. So you can use it all around. Okay, another ingredient we used today was salt. Actually, we haven't put the salt in, but we're going to. And I'm very particular about salt. If I put it in early, salt actually will inhibit the yeast from growing. Okay, so I usually put it in later. So when this is done sponging, I'm going to add the salt and I'm going to add the extra flour. And then that will help the yeast to just kind of stabilize. When you forget salt in your bread, 2 things will happen. Number 1, you're going to taste it, because salt actually enlivens all the flavors of the bread. The other thing is, without the salt in the bread, you'll end up with this mushroom top bread. It will rise and rise and rise and rise because there was no salt in there to inhibit it from over-rising. So two things, those are the two things that would happen. And then be very selective about your salts. On your handout, I've written what you should look for in a good quality salt, but I'm looking for a salt that has the minerals still in it and hasn't been heat processed. So I want everything as close to the way God designed it so my body can benefit from it. So this is just one brand that I use, and it's just a very high quality brand. It's called Real Salt, and you can buy it in most bread making internet sites. All right, another ingredient is our olive oil. And those of you who've been taking the Healthy Living series, you know that I'm very particular about olive oil also. You guys hear that timer in the background?
Yes.
Yep, we're almost done with our sponging. So olive oil, as you know, we want it to be in a dark bottle. We want a nice small pouring spout. We want it to be cold pressed. That would be a higher quality. So be very selective about your olive oil. You can use other oils in the bread, whatever is your favorite. And we also, as I told you, we use the water. Just to step back to that part of the recipe, you can use any liquid you want. You can use milk, you can use juice, you can use broth. You can make a good garlic herb bread and use maybe a vegetable broth instead of water to add even more flavor to it. So you can be as creative as you want. Some people even use their potato water once they've boiled potatoes. Just have fun with it. Another ingredient that we're using is the honey. Once again, honey, you can use any sweetener you want. If you prefer agave nectar, you can use that. If you prefer using sorghum or molasses, you can use that. You can even use a dry, like a sucanat or a sugar if you prefer, but just realize that's going to alter the liquid ingredients. Okay, so we might need to use less flour. So if you're using a liquid sweetener like honey or agave nectar or something like that, then everything should be fine with the way the recipe is written. Now, as soon as this is done sponging, we're going to go ahead and add the salt, which I've talked about, and then we're also going to add gluten. This is vital gluten. It consists of gluten protein that creates strength and stability when added to the dough. It's very helpful when you're using a low gluten flour or you're adding additional ingredients such as nuts and grains or seeds to the bread. It's going to help the bread rise even better. It kind of helps lighten the loaf. So just use a little bit though. You only need about 1 tablespoon per cup of flour at the most. I even use less than that. Now if you're using a bread machine, sometimes a bread machine you have a more dense loaf of bread than what we're making today. So adding gluten would help it to rise and be a little bit lighter. But it is optional. And I've even found it in some of our local supermarkets, but most of the time I buy it from the internet sites that sell bread making supplies. Okay? Now gluten, just realize that is processed flour. So we don't want to be putting a lot of it in our bread, just enough to help it rise a little bit. Okay, so what we're using today is our Bosch mixer. This is one way to make bread, and as I said, 5 loaves in less than 2 hours, because I don't have a lot of extra time, but I need my family to have this kind of bread. So this is a very high quality machine. And as you might have seen when I had the lid up and you were looking at it, it has 3 hooks for the dough hook. 2 of them are working the dough, and the third is like a cutting knife. And so when that dough goes around every 8 times, it cuts into that dough, just like as if you were hand kneading it and you kept folding it and then pushing it aside. This dough hook is perfect for developing the gluten in your bread. The gluten is what's going to give it that elasticity, which is going to make a really pretty loaf of bread, and it's going to, stick together when you slice it as opposed to crumbling apart. So it's going to help that bread do what it's supposed to. So this machine is the highest quality machine you can get for making bread. Now, besides all that, I would have bought it just because I can do 5 loaves in less than 2 hours, because time is of essence, So this machine, you can buy it from different places. You can also buy it from Designed Healthy Living, and it's going to last you a lifetime. It is a very well-made machine. And the pitcher that I use to measure the water, you can get that as an additional attachment. You can just set it right up here, and you have a very high-quality blender, almost as good as the Vitamix. Okay, so it is exceptional. And for those of you who have done the vegetable class and we had to shred all of those vegetables to sample, you remember that? Mm-hmm. Some people were having to hand shred them. Well, there's a shredder that fits on here, and it just makes that a breeze. Like within less than 4 minutes, I had all those vegetables shredded. Wow. So it's like, life is good. So I want to cook healthy, but I don't want to do it laboriously. I want attachments that work for me. Okay, so this is the Bosch mixer. The other machine that you have to have, I mean, this is an optional machine. You can use a bread machine, you can hand knead, you can do whatever it takes to get the bread in your family, but there's one machine that you have to have to get this quality bread. Remember all those nutrients we saw that we were missing when we aren't milling the grain ourselves? Well, I want to introduce you to this machine here. Okay, this is our NutriMill. Like I said, we have to have a way of milling the grain ourselves. And when someone told me, Annette, you got to make your own bread and mill your own wheat, I'm like, are you kidding? Like, how in the world would you mill wheat? I mean, so as you can see, this could fit on your countertop. I use it in my pantry. I just turn it on there. I go ahead and just put my grain in the top. And I'm just going to turn it on. And if you want to see, you can see the grain just dropping in. Okay, so when that's all done, just take your bowl out, open it up, and you have flour. We have to be able to mill the wheat ourselves. The good thing about this is, yes, this is going to be an investment, but it's going to pay off because making your own bread is much cheaper than any bread you're buying in the store, not to mention all those health benefits that you just saw. Now, when you looked at those nutrients that we lose, if I were to say I have a supplement that would give you all these nutrients, would you buy it? If I told you, hey, this is going to help prevent cancer, help prevent heart disease, help prevent diabetes, help with PMS, would you buy it if I sold you a supplement like that? Probably so. But instead, we get to make bread and enjoy it even more than a supplement. So there you go. So this would be a one-time investment, but a lifetime of enjoying the goodness that God's given us. Okay, so our sponging is done, and now, can you see how much it rose? Looks pretty, doesn't it? You can still see the bubbles inside. We've got good yeast to work with today. So I'm going to turn it on just to kind of beat that back down so I have room to put the rest of the flour in. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead. We're going to put our salt in, and then this is the gluten that I talked about. And now we're going to go ahead and add the rest of the flour. Now my goal this time is to add enough flour so that it cleans the side of the bowl as it's mixing. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a head start with about 5 generous cups of flour. Put some more flour in. And as soon as I have it cleaning the sides of the bowl, then I'm going to let it knead the dough for 6 to 7 minutes. And you can kind of tell that it's starting to clean the sides of the bowl. Now that it's cleaning the sides of the bowl, I'm going to put the lid back on. I'm going to set my timer for 6 minutes. And we're going to let that knead the dough. We're going to look at the dough and see if it's developed, if the gluten is developed. So if I just pinch a piece off, actually I might want a little bit of oil on my hands, and roll it into a ball. And then just start playing with it, pulling it apart. Does it rip? Does it tear? Or does it just keep stretching and making it kind of like a window, not an open window, but just a window that you can kind of see through? This means my gluten is well developed and my bread's going to rise well and be able to make the different dishes that we're going to make today. Now I'm just going to lightly oil my counter here. You know, for years we were taught to flour it, but I don't want any more flour added to my dough. So I'm going to use oil. Now another thing I forgot to point out is that I don't start my timer on that kneading process until all of the flour has been put in, until it's at the point where it's cleaning the sides. So that timing is important. So right now, I wouldn't want to add any more flour into the dough either because it would not work properly to develop the right gluten. So all my flour needed to be added before I started that timer. So we got 5 pounds of bread dough here. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to get one of my very favorite tools. This is called a dough scraper. This makes bread making fun. You can find this at usually any of the cooking stores, some of your kitchen supply stores. But it makes this a lot of fun. very easy. This first loaf I'm going to make is my 2-pound loaf. I'm going to use this pan here. If you're not familiar with how much dough it's going to require, then just kind of have your pan ready so you can kind of visualize, is that going to be enough? Here's what you want to do now. Make sure your counter's got the oil on it, is I'm just going to press it out. Now I'm not going to press it out flat. As you can see, it's not totally flat, but it's about, I don't know what you would say, like 1.5 inches thick. And then I'm going to start just folding over the corners like that. And bring it up like that. Bring that corner in like that. Then I'm going to pinch that together. Now, I'm going to turn it right side up. Just kind of rock it a little bit. And here's my pan. As you can see, that's going to fit perfectly in my pan. And I'm just going to, well, wait a minute. Before I do that, I'm just going to show you something really neat. Get you like a serrated knife, and then just go ahead and make 3 slits on the top. Now that's going to do 2 things. 1, it's going to look really pretty. And 2, it's going to help that bread rise just a little bit higher and look nice and pretty. Now before I set it over by my stove to rise, I'm going to put just a little bit of egg white on the top. Just going to brush it on there. And then, because I want you guys to be impressed, I'm going to decorate it with some seeds. And what I've done is I've made a combination of different seeds, some poppy seeds, flax seeds, sesame seeds, and sunflower seeds. And I've just mixed them together into my own little bowl, and I store it in the cabinet for any time I want to use it. But it makes a very pretty topping on my bread. Do you see that? Now, if I was working in a bakery, I would have a proofing oven to make this rise. Since I'm not working in a bakery and I'm working in my kitchen, I'm going to cover it with some saran wrap. That's going to keep that moisture and heat inside so that it will have a great environment to rise. Okay. So I've got that sealed on there. Now I'm going to go set it by the stove. I want it set, I like the gas stove because the grills are up high and air can travel all the way around while it's rising, versus sitting it here on the counter, the air can't get underneath it. So this way I will get a better rise. So that's going to rise typically anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes depending on the time of the year and how the temperature of your kitchen. The next thing we're going to make, because we're going to get these in the oven right away, is our pizza rolls. So I know you guys are wanting to sample this, so I'm going to get it started as quickly as I can. So I've cut off some dough, and I'm going to roll it out with my rolling pin. And I want to make a nice rectangle. I want it fairly thin because I want to put a lot of ingredients on it, and I want the flavor of the ingredients to come through. Okay, I've got a nice rectangle here. I went ahead and made some pizza sauce. There are some recipes in the Healthy Treasures cookbook that you can use. One is under the pizza recipe, another one is just how to make, it's titled Make Your Own Pizza Sauce. But you know, sometimes you're just in a hurry, so just taking a can of tomato paste, adding a little water and some seasonings, and you're good to go. I don't want as much sauce as I do for a regular pizza because I'm going to roll this up. The extra liquid will increase my baking time, so I don't want to overdo the liquid. Now, we're going to top it with some sausage. Our family favorite is turkey sausage that we buy locally from an organic supplier. And we like a lot of toppings. I'm going to use the turkey sausage, I'm going to use some cheese, but once again, be creative. You can do anything with this bread. Any toppings whatsoever, and have fun with it. Okay, and of course we want cheese, and you know America loves cheese. Do you guys like cheese? Yes. Okay, so you want a lot of cheese on this, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to put a lot of cheese on here. So you guys will be very happy today. And then I'm going to top it with some Italian seasoning. Now, wheat bread is a stronger flavor bread than your white breads that you're used to from the store, so use those seasonings very liberally. Okay, so now we're going to roll it up. And I kind of pull it towards me as I roll it up, and that actually will make a prettier pizza roll. So just kind of stretch it. Remember, we developed that gluten so that our bread is able to stretch. So I'm rolling it up and stretching it as I go. I'm going to bring that last end over and pinch it as best I can to keep those goodies inside. Okay. Now, this is where our cookie sheet, which I've lined with some parchment paper, is going to come in handy. So I'm going to use my scraper and just go ahead and cut my pizza rolls. See, if you had a knife, it would be not so much fun to do this. But this dough scraper makes it very easy. I'm going to put them on my pan, and I don't want them touching. Now, the good part about these is they don't have to rise. We're going to throw them in the oven at 425 for 20 minutes, and then they are going to be good to go. Now, with my husband and I being the only ones in our house now, making this many is too many for us, so you can easily freeze these and bring them out whenever you want a quick snack. All right, so I'm going to pop those in the oven. Okay, so to make cinnamon rolls, the first thing I want to do is I want to brush some butter on this dough. Now, if you're watching your calories, you can actually just use water if you want to. You just need some liquid there for that cinnamon and sucanat or cinnamon and sugar, whatever you're using to attach itself to. And some people have even used honey, and that will work too. So I just want enough just for that. Now I'm going to put some cinnamon on it. Remember, I want a lot because wheat bread is a stronger flavor bread. It's a good flavor, but it makes it so your spices are not quite as strong if you don't have a lot on there. Okay, I'm going to top that with some sucanat. Sucanat stands for sugarcane natural. You can find it under various names, and in the cookbook I describe what it is and what you're looking for. So you might want to read those pages in the beginning about intriguing ingredients. And how much you want to put on here is just pretty much up to you and your family how much sweet you want it. Now I'm going to add some raisins. Now these raisins have actually I cooked them just a little bit in some apple juice to soften them up, because if I don't use soft raisins on the bread, if I use hard raisins, then I'm going to have hard raisins in my bread. If I soften them, then I'm going to have soft raisins in my bread, and it's going to taste better. So if you just warm up some water, actually, you can warm up water to soften them, but it's better if you use like an apple juice, because the water will actually take the sweetness out of the raisins. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and roll this up. And once again, I'm going to kind of pull it towards me, but now this is one where you need to kind of glue it. So I'm going to put a little bit of butter on there as I roll it to glue the sides, the edges, so that when it's all done and baked, it will look really good and stay together, so that when I put it in the toaster, everything will stay all nice and have a nice swirl to it. And put that in my pan, and then we're going to have it rise. Once again, I'm going to go ahead and put some Saran wrap on it to keep that warm moisture in there. So what do you think of our goodness? Yeah. You ready to eat? All right, so let me just start slicing some cinnamon raisin bread for you guys. But one of the neat things you need to have, one of the best tools to have, is a good bread knife. So go ahead and splurge, get you a good quality bread knife. It will make all the difference in the world in cutting your bread. So here we have our pizza rolls, we have our loaf of bread, and we have our cinnamon rolls. And there is so much more that you could do with this. What I want you to remember is, remember those scriptures? Why do you spend money on what is not bread and what does not satisfy? God says, I've given you the good. This is part of the good. He says, I'm your daily bread. This daily bread will satisfy physically and spiritually. So enjoy the goodness.